July 10th, and my name is Navsharan Kaur.
How old were you in 1984?
I was 24.
And what was your occupation at the time?
I was working in a research center in Chandigarh. I had just finished my MA, and I was working in Chandigarh in a research center called Center for Research in Rural and Industrial Development.
Nice.
That was my first job, and I was there.
And where were you in June 1984?
I was working on a large project which was actually investigating the causes of communal violence in India. And I was in Indore for field work. The project was in a number of Indian states which had been seeing communal violence, basically Hindu, Muslim. And I was part of a team which was investigating Madhya Pradesh. And I was in Indore at that time when June happened.
And how did you hear about the violence then from Indore?
We were traveling in the interior, some villages in the outskirts of Indore. That very day I didn't hear anything. We came back at night, and I think I can't recall now, but I don't think there was a television in the hotel. We were staying in a small hotel. We went out and to eat out in a dhaba, and that's where some people were talking about कि ऐसा हुआ है, कुछ अमृतसर में हुआ है, वो जो सिखों का मंदिर है उसके ऊपर कुछ हुआ है, और हमने पूछा भी, but nothing came out. And now I don't remember that I investigated more or did whatever. So we came back and I slept, and in the morning, the next morning, it was in the newspapers, and then we panicked. And then I didn't know what to do. Like, there was no way of, I don't think my parents didn't have a landline at home in Amritsar, and I wanted to reach them. But then we decided to call the office in Chandigarh. And then found out that this is happening, and it was happening as we spoke. So 2 days later we came back, and I went straight to home. We used to our ancestral houses near Khalsa College in Amritsar, and that's where we were. And I saw all my parents. My father was not there at that time, but my mother and the extended family, they were all, like, they all came and they hugged me and they said what they've been. There was a curfew in the city and they couldn't go out, but from our rooftop they said they heard big, as they said, gole chil rahe the, asman became dark, and then my father on that day was there, and he told everyone to get down and don't do any tamashgiri kothe te chad ke, because what if things fall. And but people were very, very scared, and they were scared, and it was curfew. So there were rumors flying around at that time that thousands have died, and there's water now contaminated near Golden Temple, and nobody could go there. So this lasted and I was there for about 2 to 3 days, and then I had to return to Chandigarh. So I did go back to Chandigarh, and then the whole process started. Now, then you started reading the newspapers, and news started coming out, and then my father was one of the first people who were taken by, there was a group of citizens who were taken to Golden Temple to see what had happened also, and Kotha Sahib gir gaya, or whatever had happened. But they were also stopped, they were not allowed entry. Something happened and I can't recall what. But then my father, the next time when I was in Amritsar a few days after, so he said how he saw jutiyan, chapla, which were left out, and which became then later on also, people counted the number of jode to make an estimate of how many people were killed inside. and then there was no looking back. I mean, then there was all kinds of how it had happened. The blame game began, and the desertions, and the army. And I also had a number of cousins and members of the family who were in the army. One of my uncles, he was a general, and he was, I think, he was asked to move his troops. He was posted at that time in Madhya Pradesh, but was asked to move to Amritsar, and perhaps it was to lead this operation which General Bulbul had led. But at that time he said he got out of it, and he said, no, I can only go there with my own troops, and it will not be possible to move my troops in 2 days or in 24 hours, whatever that was. So, but then that same uncle was posted in Jalandhar. And of course, now if I look back, I remember the dilemma, and I think he was doing whatever he was, but he was torn also. And I could see that he became quiet. He was also would not talk very much, would not divulge very much, but was trying to, I think, assuage the feelings of his own troops, and managing it. So these were basically, that's how, I mean, in these little bits and pieces, I remember the times as they were happening, and it's all June, July, and August. That one is the realization of the magnitude of the violence and what had happened actually began to piece together much later. I mean, earlier it was all this who died and who survived and who did what, and there was the kind of sensational stories also. Shubhek Singh died, and Bhindranwale, and all kinds of stories, and somebody would say, oh no, he escaped, others would say, no, he was shot in the back, he did not face the bullets. So all kinds of, I think lives were filled with different narratives which were coming out, and it was only much later, as I'm saying, that one could piece them together to form what really happened.
What was your reaction? What did you think or feel at the time?
You know, I actually, we were, in a way, yes, Golden Temple's destruction was something very, very sad. That how can a place like this be destroyed? And it was, I didn't see it as sacrilege, but more like, what a bad decision. How could anyone at the helm of affairs could take such a bad decision, which was so hurtful for thousands, and which ended up being the cause for so many lives destroyed. So that was the, because some of us who were part of, I was raised an atheist, in a Sikh family, but as an atheist. Didn't have. We used to go to Darbar Sahib, as I grew up in Amritsar, like routinely. It's a place you go, and you also go Matha Teko, everything. It's part of your culture and part of your upbringing also. Although I saw gurus also, and Sikh as history, a very interesting history, and interested in the period and what the gurus were doing, but not as a person who would not ask questions. So the use of temple also for the purpose of it was being used. I wouldn't say that I was upset that Bhindranwale was using it for political purpose, because in Sikhism politics and religion had always gone together, and I mean that didn't shock Sikh Punjabi like me, whereas it was quite shocking for others maybe. But of course we were totally like many other people. I was also part of those movements who were totally opposed to the politics of Bhindranwale, to the idea of Khalistan also, Khalistan which was being promised on the lines of religion to the exclusion of others, and we always thought that Punjab belonged to Punjabis, and Hindus were also a very a part of it, and you could not have created another entity which was only for one religious group. So I was part of the politics which raised these slogans which said Hindu Raj na Khalistan, Raj kare Mazdoor Kisan. And it was any nation state based on the idea of religion was not acceptable. So in that sense, the end of that was, I mean, not to be celebrated because it ended so violently and it was not resolved. It was just crushed through brute force, and also the violation of human rights that happened there, how no warning was given, how all protocols of war were also completely overlooked, was a cause of concern. So some of us who opposed Bhindranwale were also at the same time were at the forefront saying how this military operation was another operation which was done, which should not have been done in any democratic country. And there was no way it had met the sanction of the larger people. Nobody was consulted, and how it was designed by a small coterie of people. First letting it reach a level where it reached, and then not allowing any dialogue, any way in which common people, ordinary people could be taken out, and how the operation was done was totally unacceptable.
Moving on to November 1984, where were you then?
Oh, November, I was in Chandigarh, and the day that was again very when Mrs. Gandhi was assassinated. We were in the office, and it happened, and we all came together in the conference room, started talking about it, and the director of the center where I worked was actually quite close to Mrs. Gandhi and Congress Party, but that was his personal, that's how he was. And we started talking about, and then the news of violence began to, that rumors were, there was no violence on the very first day, but there were rumors flying that, oh, something is happening in Delhi, somebody is trying to add poison to the water sources, and people were being killed in Punjab. Of course, we were in Punjab, and we were in Chandigarh, but we knew in Punjab, and at that research center, there were many journalists used to come frequent. So they were all being contacted, talked about, and so nothing that no violence is happening in Punjab. Nobody is killing Hindus and putting them in trains and sending them to Delhi. But we started hearing that these are the things which are beginning to be talked about. But then the final thing happened that my father was in Mumbai at that time. And he's a playwright, he was a playwright, and also an artistic director. He was in Bombay with his troupe to perform in Bombay. And they also had a music, there was a group of people with him who would sing songs, and in Bombay they decided to get a CD recorded in one of the good studios. And IPTA in Bombay were the local hosts, so they introduced them to a music, a recording studio. and they went there. I think they had a rehearsal on the 30th, and on first they had to go back to the. When Mrs. Gandhi died, the studio owner called the police and said that there were a group of Sikh people who came to the studio and who were singing songs like "Is Khoon Ka Badla Hum Lenge." Now it was there was a poet by the name of Asad Hoshiarpuri who had written a song about workers. And the song was, it was a poem, "Is Khoon Ka Badla Hum Lenge," and my father and the troupe, they composed it and they were singing. It was one of the songs. So this person who did not understand Punjabi very well, but he did understand कि ये कुछ खून की बात है. So he called the police, and next day when they went, which was 1st November, when they went to the studio, they were arrested. All of them. I think there were 6 or 7 of them. The lead singer, his wife, who was also a singer, they had 2 kids also who were also with them. And the entire troupe was arrested. They were supposed to take the train on first night to come to Delhi. But they were arrested. So they couldn't take the train. And so when the next day I learned, and it came in the newspapers, and that's where I learned that my father is arrested in Bombay. So, and on the other hand, the news of violence started coming out, and that people are being killed in the trains. So then it was a very, very difficult day and time. Then many of the people in that institute and the director, they knew that my father is a very, very secular man, and nothing to do with Mrs. Gandhi's killing or whatever. So Mr. Ribeiro was I think the governor of, governor though he was Punjab ka, he was posted there in Bombay. So the director of the institute where I worked contacted him, and then with the artist community in Bombay, IPTA community, there was A.K. Hangal and Amol Palekar and many other people got together, and they were trying to furnish a bail and get them out, etc. But consequently, because they were arrested, they were not able to take the train on that night, and that train actually saw killings of many people. When the train reached, it was Frontier Mail or so, but people mentioned that they could only take the train 2 days later. And when we all were standing at the railway station when they arrived, and the lead singer Paramjit and his wife Renu Singh, she was crying. She had a boy and a girl, and they all had Judy. A boy had a Juda, and she said, मेरा पक्का ख्याल सी कि ਅਸੀਂ ਵੱਢ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਜਾਵਾਂਗੇ, ਔਰ ਮੈਂ ਬੱਚੇ ਦੀ ਗੁੱਤ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤੀ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕੁੜੀ ਬਣਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ, ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਰਡਸ ਦੇ ਥੱਲੇ ਪਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ. And although Ribeiro had given police guard to them, but everybody knew that police is not going to be helpful if the mobs attacked, but thankfully they arrived safely. So that was one part of the story. Then my uncle, my maternal uncle, my nanny, they were all in Rajouri Garden, and only 3 or 4 days later we learned that how they had to escape, because rioters came, they started banging their doors, and then there was an announcement from Gurdwara, and they lived very close to the big Rajouri Garden Gurdwara, so they all were there, and they took shelter there. Who was a very famous professor of political science in Delhi University, and who had a very good library, and he lived in Patel Nagar with his artist wife, who's my Buaji, and he said when we met him after a week or 10 days, he said he was very distraught. He said he almost saw the mobs coming to that street and saying कि एक सिख दा घर है ਇਹਨੂੰ ਜਲਾਓ. And he said the only thing he was worried about was his books. He said मेरी इतनी अच्छी library ख़त्म हो जाएगी just because these goons are out on the streets to kill, and for them I'm just a Sikh and my belongings they would loot or whatever, but they wouldn't even know what they are destroying. And that actually he got very for I think for years it had so affected him. He wrote large number of pieces, analyses and all of that, which is part of our now in the public domain. But and then also they were after a few months or whenever, people also in very Punjabi way started joking about it also, and he would say बेटा ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਭੂਆ ਜੀ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਨਾ 2 ਹਿੱਸਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੰਡੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ 84 ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲੇ 84 ਤੋਂ ਮੈਂ ਅੱਜ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹ ਸਫੇਦੀ ਕਰਾ ਲਈਏ ਹਾਊਸ ਪੇਂਟਿੰਗ ਐਂਡ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਦੋਂ ਕਰਾਇਆ ਸੀ 84 ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕਿ 84 ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ. ਸੋ I mean, life's got completely changed after that, and I think people saw some of and one other very close friend who had got admission in Delhi Engineering College had very recently moved to Delhi. I think colleges begin in September or August, and that's when he had moved. Was very new to the city. He came from Chandigarh. And he was near Ames. He was returning from college and he was attacked by the mobs and was beaten he was thrown on the ground, and his hands were like this, and they tried to crush his fingers. All his fingers broke. He was beaten very badly and left for dead, and he was lying on the footpath very close to Ames, and a car came, a person, he put him in his car back seat, took him, gave him first aid, admitted him to hospital, and then when he regained consciousness, they called his parents from Chandigarh who came and took them, and he never came back to Delhi. I mean, of course he didn't pursue engineering, and he said, I'm never returning to this city. So that was one of the things which I saw personally, member of the family getting so badly brutalized.
On one end there's your family that's going through all of this, then there's the official narrative, then there's you yourself. How did all of this confusion and violence make you feel?
I mean, it wasn't. It was a very sad time of my life. I think we are going through a similar patch now. What's happening now? How people are being lynched. How Junaid was lynched, how Bahelu Khan was lynched, and every time you open the newspaper or you hear about it, and you're reminded of how this is replaying of then also we saw how tires were put on around necks and people were killed, and mobs looked on or participated. So making sense of it has been, I mean, it's not that for a person like me and many like me who were in their early 20s at that time, it was not that it happened suddenly. We were seeing it building up also. If those of us who remembered other riots also which happened, and had heard the stories of partition from our families, and saw what they at that time described the madness. But this time we didn't think it was madness. It was organized. And it was very clear that it was organized. And it became very clear shortly after. I mean, those days are 10-15 days when it's happening. It's hard to make sense of it because you are just following, you're trying to see your relatives are okay, you're trying to see if everyone's safe around you or not. But very shortly after, I think this has been a remarkable tradition in this country also, because I remember that PUCL PUDR report, who are the guilty, actually came out in November. It came out very quickly, and they did this survey, and it was the conclusions were very clear that it was an organized massacre. It was not street madness. It was not like people were mourning the death of a leader and that's why things went out of hand. It was very clearly planned. And that planning, they were able to actually peel the layers of that organized violence very, very clearly. And it came out as a stark truth that how it was, how the rumors began, the role of the police and the administration, the role of Congress party, how mobs were mobilized. There was no spontaneity in this. Mobs were mobilized, and the fact-finding report, by the end of November, we all knew. And then what began was a movement for justice. You seek justice. You ask for commissions of inquiry. You want people to be compensated. You want people to be punished for what they are. You seek accountability. And very soon it began. That part began, and it is one of those riots where the early ones, and then 89 happened in Bhagalpur, and then of course Gujarat. By that time, the civil society response had also become very structured and formal, how it responded to 2002. But 84 was, I think in Delhi it was PUCL, PUDR and people who were Nagrik Ekta Manch, and small groups of people who came together, who started, who helped other people make sense of what was called quote unquote madness. And I think they gave us the intellectual tools also to understand what happened and why it happened and where, who were the guilty. I mean, it was so, in a way, it was symbolic, but also so clearly they put the finger on who were the guilty. And it became much easier then to quell all rumors that were happening at that time, and but lead to, from then onwards, the journey was towards seeking justice for what had happened, and not be tied to or negating this or that, or building a counter narrative was built, and very early on in this around that event. I mean, in many places it took months for any fact finding etc. to come out, but in this case it was quite early on and was very powerful. So that's the legacy, I think, which we continue to work on, and even now when Pehlu Khan happened, Junaid happened very recently, and so many others, Akhlaq killing also, there are citizens groups who go at once, collect facts and put them in the public domain, so that you create a narrative which is centered on the experience of those who experience that violence, and not anybody. Like, you still hear people saying that Junaid was killed over a jagda on train seat, which was not the case, and which the fact-finding reports are clearly saying there was no jhagda over the seat. They were killed because they wanted to create a spectacle, that how now nobody with a skull cap is free in this. Then you're not allowed to live in this country and carry on the markers of your identity. And so a spectacle had to be created, and that's how they created it. And I mean, building on these are very progressive legacies also. I think we are able to generate, and we are lucky that way, that we are able to generate counter narratives fairly quickly. Yes.
So in these counter narratives and fact finding and everything that you heard, who was committing the violence in November?
The mobs which were mobilized, as the report also mentioned, the mobs were mobilized by the Congress party. It was an act of omission and commission. Police did not do their duty, administrators did not do their duty. Congress party as a party was totally, deeply implicated in this, and they provided the cover of impunity to others on the street, the small time mahalla level leaders who were given a free hand to just go do whatever they wanted to. And so there is, they were the ones who mobilized, and one can now see it now when people are saying Mr. Modi is not speaking out, Mr. Modi is not saying, whenever he says something, it means that it is symbolizing something else, and that's what Mr. Rajiv Gandhi did at that time when he said, oh, when a big tree falls, there's bound to be earth shakes. So this was his way of telling his people, go do whatever, and it'll be justified in the name of this. So this was very clear, their complete participation and vision of this violence. There is no denying in that.
Did you continue living where you were living after the violence, or did you leave?
No, I mean, because I was in Chandigarh, I continued to be in Chandigarh for a few years, and then I moved to Canada to do my PhD. So I was there from early 90s to, I mean, this happened in 84. I moved to Haryana in 87 and started teaching in a university in Rohtak, and then moved to Canada to do my PhD.
Right. Do you share feelings about 1984 with friends, family, or have you spoken the violence ever since?
Yes, we do. Actually, in the 90s when I went to Canada, it was reopening of the chapters, because there was a community. I was in Ottawa, the university, but we used to go to Gurdwara, because Gurdwaras are a place where you meet community, and interesting, I find that Canada's multiculturalism also meant that which religious identity you hold. So people would ask us, are you Hindu or you Sikh? So if you're Sikh, you go to Gurdwara. If you're Hindu, you go to the temple. But it was a very live debate there also, and we continued to. But I think what I would say that and I was told by some of the friends who were Canadians, but whose parents were from India and who knew what had happened. We did bring them stories also of, say, PUCL, PUDR. And I remember my husband married to a person who belongs to a Hindu family. So one of my good friend in the PhD program who belonged to a Sikh family, I mean, she was a Canadian kid who was born and raised in Canada, but Sikh family. She said, well, Atul is the first Hindu person I've seen condemning the attack on Golden Temple, and that's when we said that there are thousands like him in India. And we should not forget that it was not, I mean, of course, Sikhs experienced it on their bodies and souls, the attack and the violence that happened, but it is not that all others endorsed it.
Right.
There were others also who condemned it and who came out, and that's how we know from early November, by mid-November, late November, the report was also out. It was they were not Sikh people, they were all, they wouldn't call themselves Hindu, but they were not from Sikh families who did the reports and who came out and who worked with children and who worked with widows and who worked with, so they were, that's our legacy. Those who were killing Sikhs were also being killed because they were Sikhs. It was not that they were being killed because they were any human being, because they carried the markers of religious identity, and that's why they were killed. As Muslims are being killed now because they are Muslims. So these are complexities of our the experience of our melting pot and part of our very, very communal history. And I still think, why do people kill others and just because they don't look like them, and what make them do so? But now I know it's not common people. Common people would not just start killing others. It is when your leaders, those who are leading you in your name, they incite violence, and you benefit out of it also. So you
Definitely.
do.
Did 1984 bring about any changes in your personal outlook or life as such?
Yes, it did. It did. It was a very close brush with a reality. It made you realize that, oh, you are vulnerable because your name is. And I kept. I think that has been the experience throughout the 80s. Every time I traveled abroad, because my last name is Singh, I would be taken out of at the airports also. In the US, have been taken, my Singh encircled, and special search and a special treatment because of your last name. And also in every other way. I mean, you were made to realize that you are someone and the suspect, and you have to prove your innocence and your loyalty to this country. And yes, there were many small incidents, but yes, where you were made aware of these. Even when, as I said, I'm an atheist, but yes, my name, I'm very proud of my heritage and our history of our gurus and the teachings. And if you are being punished because of that, yes, it does change you in a fundamental way, and it did. It has a background and a history, and I think it was, I would call it, as I said, spontaneous. It's been building up hatred and also mistrust, which is the roots of which are very, very political. I mean, how the state was divided, how the language formula happened, how they were aspirations of people which remained unfulfilled. I mean, there are many, many reasons that led to, and a kind of politics which the Congress party played, and also the Akalis in many ways, and who fanned hatred and who supported some faction to gain certain vote bank. I mean, all of this is now in the public domain. I don't want to give a big lecture on that, but it happened. It had a build up, a slow build up, and it when Mrs. Gandhi made the decision of attacking Golden Temple, which was a very, very poor, bad decision. This was again things went out of her hand. Things that she had contributed to creating went out of her hand, and then she was so callous and thought nothing about just raiding a place. Who brings tanks to a place of worship? But they were brought, and then when she was killed, the whole issue of teaching Sikhs a lesson, I think, was very much part of the Sikhs who were a community which is a proud community, which is doing well, and it contributed to mobilizing hatred against them, their success, their pride, their they teach them a lesson. I mean, many people have done small studies also from other parts of India where their land or their businesses were attacked just because others were very jealous of them, of their success. But just to say that there was a build up to this.